Well, I'm out today on the blue Revolt. Same one I was on in the last video. I did want to film yesterday when I was on the red one, but the weather conspired against me. As is often the case in Wales, they forecast no rain, and when I got outside it was absolutely chucking it down. And there's two problems with that. Firstly, if I don't remember to continually wipe the camera lens, all you get is a blurry mess. And secondly, the microphone isn't waterproof. And it's cold today, but it's not raining, so that's okay. I've mentioned this before, but in Wales, in winter, you've got three options. It's either dry and cold, mild and wet, and sometimes cold and wet. But it's never mild and dry in the winter. I always find it really difficult to get going in the cold weather. I don't mind riding in the cold, but when I get back, all my Strava times will be a lot slower than normal. I don't know why that is. What I thought I'd talk about today is just general checking and maintenance of your bike. I was going to say staying on top of your bike, and then I realised that sounded a bit silly, because if you want to stay on top of your bike, just ride it. Now I do like to support my local bike shop, because there are some things I can't do and there's some things I don't want to do, and I'd like to know that the shop is there when I need it. And if everybody starts buying everything online and just doing their own maintenance, the bike shops will go out of business, and I think that'll be bad for all of us. That's not to say that you shouldn't maintain your own bike if you want to. But that said, there are some things, just small things, you need to do yourself. Unless you have the most incredible relationship with your bike shop and it's very close to you, there's always going to be little bits and pieces that need doing, and you don't want to take it to the shop. And sometimes you want to go for a ride, and you ring your local bike shop and they say, "Oh, I can't fit you in till next Thursday." And just generally checking things can prevent a disaster from happening sometime in the future. One of the things you should check on a fairly regular basis is the chain. Make sure that it's clean and properly lubed. I use a wax-based lubricant, and every time I wash the bike, I dry it off, dry the chain off, and then re-lube it. Sometimes not on the same day, but you know what I mean. Another thing I recommend is getting a chain checker tool. A little thing that you put into your chains for two prongs, and if the prongs drop through, the chain's worn out. Because riding with a worn out chain is going to wear out the cassette on the chain rings too. So it could end up costing you a lot more money. I know Park Tool stuff is incredibly expensive, but I did buy a Park Tool chain checker because the difference was only £3 or £4. I felt something like that, you want accuracy. Check your wheel bearings just by moving your wheel side to side. I mean, obviously, you know, if you take your bike into the shop for a service, they'll do that. I'm just giving you the basic checks so that if something's going wrong, you can catch it before it gets too bad. And then hold on to your front brake and just move the bike, rock the bike backwards and forwards and see if there's any play in the headset. And then finally, well, not finally, one of the last checks I do before I go for a ride is the guitar test on your spokes. So just run your fingers around the outside of the wheel across the spokes and see if they all make a similar tone. You don't get a really dull sound. And in terms of tools, one of the most used and best investments that I made was my Joe Blow track pump. Keeps your tyres nicely inflated without too much effort. It's got a gauge on it, which may not be the world's most accurate gauge, but it's certainly good enough for the sort of riding I do. And I've managed to seat all my tubeless tyres, including the mountain bike, with it. And then I got some T-bar Allen key torque wrenches. And I've got 4 of them. 4, 5, 6 and 7 Newton meters, which covers most things on a bike. My old torque wrench, you had to turn 2 dials and click this and unclick that, so you were never really sure whether you'd got the torque value correct or not. Whereas these, each one is set individually, you never adjust it, so you know you're right all the time. And you can put different size Allen key heads in them as well. So it covers most things on a bike. And then I bought a cable cutter, because if you need to change a cable and you go through all of the hassle of feeding it through the frame and all of that noise, when you cut the excess off, you want it to be a clean cut and not start fraying, because otherwise you're going to throw the cable away and start again. And I also have a packet of little end cap things that you put over the cable you've cut and then squeeze it together with a pair of pliers, and then it stops the cable fraying anymore. And there is something else I forgot to mention. If you've got internally routed cables, I've got a little plastic tube that fits inside the cable housing. So you take the cable out, or should I say, you don't take the cable out, you feed this plastic tube through and it follows the cable to the opening on the other side. And from there, you can then pull the cable out, because that tube is in place, and you feed the new cable through that tube. Because if it gets lost in the frame, it's a nightmare to get it back out. Ask me, I've done it. And those are just the little basic things that I do myself. Another thing that I always do is my own tyres. I run all my bikes tubeless. And I've mentioned this before. If you're running tubeless and you get a puncture, good chance it'll seal. But if it doesn't, you're walking home. Whereas when you're running tubes, if you get a puncture, Whereas if you're running tubes and you get a puncture, it's definitely not going to seal, and you're definitely walking home. I did have a little pump that would fit in my back pocket, but twice I had a problem out in the road, and the pump just did nothing. It wouldn't pump the tyre up at all. So that's a waste of time. So now I've ordered a muck-off electric pump, which I hope is going to work. I don't know, but I hope it will. And setting up tubeless tyres is definitely a skill worth learning. I mean, most people are afraid of it, but once you've done it a couple of times, you realise it's nowhere near as daunting as you thought. Because if you want to go for a ride and there's something wrong with a tyre and you've got a spare one, you can just do it yourself. And there's various other things as well. Sometimes you will get home with a tubeless tyre, but still it needs some further repair or plug put in or something. So just being confident enough to be able to take the tyre off, put it back on and refill the sealant means that you can get out on your bike more often than waiting for a bike shop to be able to fit you in. And another thing I found as well is you often can't get the tyres you want. This is one of the joys of living in Brexit Britain. We've imposed economic sanctions on ourselves, and now we can't get stuff when we need it. So if I see a deal come up on the internet for tyres that I use, then I just order them so that when I need them I've got them in stock, kind of thing. So I'm like a dealer in stock. What I mean is I've got them in a drawer in my shed. And one of the most difficult things for bike maintenance in Britain is keeping the bike clean. It really is a constant battle. And I don't just mean in the winter either. The state of the roads in Britain is absolutely appalling. There are many countries that we used to refer to as third world countries that have better roads than here. People in the southern hemisphere, or people in warmer parts of the northern hemisphere, won't know what I'm talking about. Because you can ride your bike for months sometimes and it'll stay clean. Whereas in Britain, you're lucky to go more than 2 days without rain. And the roads are filthy. So all of that dirt sprays up against the bike. And really, you've got to get over it. You've got to decide, you know what, I can't keep the bike clean all the time. It's just not possible. So I tend to wash the bike every third ride. And I use the muck-off pink stuff cleaner. I'm not sponsored by muck-off, but I should be, because I recommend it to so many people. But it just works. I don't know, by magic maybe, but I spray it on, rinse it off, and that's the bulk of the dirt gone. And then with a little brush, you can just brush over the more stubborn bits, and there you go, clean bike. Thoroughly dry it if you're fortunate, as I am, to have a partner who allows you to keep your bike inside, in the house. You're far better off, because it's warm and dry and the bike stays in a lot better condition. But if you're not, make sure the bike is thoroughly dry before you put it away. There's that little bit of water that stays on the chain or on the headset. That's what leads to the corrosion. And that's when things get expensive. And so, as I said, I do take my bike to my bike shop and they do the services for me. But those are the things I do in between services, just to keep the bike running the way it should, to try and avoid mechanical failures on the road and expensive repair bills. Oh, and something else I should mention is if you ride on roads that have been gritted, rinse your bike off every ride, because that salt is so corrosive. Even if you don't wash it, just, rinse it off with a hose pipe when you get home. And like any good YouTuber should say, if you found this video interesting, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already.